Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to Shaping Tomorrow on IKIM Radio. This is Shafiq Burhanuddin, a fellow at IKIM. In this episode, Alhamdulillah, we are honored to have with us a colleague of mine and a fellow as well at IKIM, specifically the Center for Science and Environment, is Dr. Muhammad Husni Muhammad Amin. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Husni.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Mr. Shafiq.
Thank you very much, Dr. Husni, for joining us. And Alhamdulillah, in this particular episode, we inshallah will be learning more about the subject matter of thinking with wisdom, which is actually based on the course that IKIM is offering for the first time, and of which Dr. Husni is the lead coordinator for this project and for this program. And inshallah, this, as Dr. Husni will tell us more, this course will be offered in the coming week. But unfortunately, it's no longer open for registration. However, inshallah, this what we intend to perhaps learn from Dr. Husni is about the purpose of the course and the importance of it, as well as the contents of it, with the hope that inshallah that more could know about this course, this subject matter, for the benefit of our future in general. So, Dr. Husni, can you tell us more about this subject matter, as well as in relation to this course that is being introduced by IKIM, and you, I mean, as the lead coordinator of this project, please, Dr. Husni.
Yes, A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa alihi washabihi ajma'in. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my colleague Shafiq for having me on his program, Shaping Tomorrow. It's an honor to be here. So regarding our program, which will be held next week, and it's like Brother Shafiq has said that it's due to good demand of the program. We have a full a number of participants already registered. We regret that we couldn't have more, but we are looking forward to have it next year, perhaps in the middle of the year. So listeners can already make a note and book the date on their diary. But regarding the program itself, we got to start with a background. So here in IKIM, we had an action research that was helmed by none other than the Deputy Director General of IKIM, Dr. Muhammad Zaidi bin Ismail, who wants us to create or design a program specifically for the public, for the professionals, for the academics, to know and learn more about thinking, and why is this such an important subject to delve into, is because this in 2018 there's a book by Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber called The Enigma of Reason, and according to these authors, that there have been more than 2,000 years of philosophical work on reason, and more than 50 years of intense experimental work on reasoning. But in today's context, before we go into the problem statement, we may rest assured that the awesome power of the human mind can continually conceive new ways of living, new ways of administering, and new ways of working. We had a 2-year experience in lockdown during the pandemic, but that didn't stop work. Some of us had shifted to working from home. Others, we have created various applications to help us continue work regardless. So we see that challenges associated with working, with living now today is continually growing, and we find there are greater demands for logical and critical thinking, especially in a comprehensive framework, because as Mercier and Sperber noted in their book, many man-made disasters and blunders are due to acts and also which accompany error in reasoning. You have a worldview, and then from the worldview, there come out your reasoning, your thought processes, and it will be manifested in your actions. So that's what we are saying. In the book, you find cases such as the Unabomber, who was a brilliant mathematician, logician, but he ended up making the wrong decisions. He made a manifesto. He came to a conclusion that the whole present, political and economic setup, there's something wrong with it. Therefore, in this manifesto, he promised to dismantle this, and that made him go into terrorism. And how we are baffled, the whole world was baffled, that how could a brilliant person, a genius perhaps, and it can come to false conclusions. And also, so this is not because of a lack of intelligence, and not certainly because of lack of imagination, but rather the failure of it. So this is why at IKIM we see that there is a problem in knowledge compartmentalization. There's some problem in the line of reasoning, and we looked into uh, solving that problem. So we realized that for Muslims to have a correct worldview, therefore a correct line of reasoning, to ensure a holistic understanding of education, of thinking itself. So that's why we need some amount of rootedness, or total amount of rootedness in what we perceive to be, or what we thought to be, the Islamic intellectual tradition. So this research had been going on had gone for 2 years, and the program that we are about to commence next week is the culmination. And we can say that the 6 modules that are in the program are the result of 2 years and several years. And in fact, 2 years is just formalization of what we're currently what we have been doing at IKIM, to formulate them into modules, as a simplification in the language that the public can follow, and it can be appreciated by both the laymen and the
Yes.
intellectuals alike.
Yes, very very interesting. A very comprehensive sort of backdrop that you just Dr. Husni just gave us there, in terms of
Yeah.
why that IKIM now is giving attention to the subject of thinking with wisdom, and now inshallah, as you said, we are offering this as a course for the first time, and inshallah, if opportunity permits us, we'll continue it in subsequent years. And it's very interesting that you quoted that, you mentioned of that book, making reference to that book, Enigma of a Reason. The title itself is very interesting. And I think it suggests that it is still a problem, in spite of the great scientific and rational advancements that the world, or especially the West, has made. They still recognize there are still flaws or shortcomings in terms of that. But I hope you could dwell a bit more into that. But before that, I think it's important that you mentioned that this started off as an action research. So it's interesting, and I think not many in the public may know that IKIM remains as a think tank. So I think we're trying to be true to that mission, to educate the public to think properly as well, not only for ourselves within this organization to think well, but inshallah we hope to I believe this is what Dr. Husni and his team seeks to achieve with this program, to try to elevate the thinking of the general Muslim public. But Dr. Husni, before we go to the next question, I do feel that you're very familiar in terms of what Islam says about this thinking itself, because thinking is very much of our tradition. And I feel that maybe a lot of the issues that this book, Enigma of Reason, is is talking about, it doesn't really apply to us in our tradition, as far as how the Quran have always enjoined thinking, right, about the Almighty, the Creator, and His creation, and it's also enjoined by the Prophet, recommended by the Prophet. Can you tell us a bit more about thinking in the Islamic tradition, which perhaps is not given much attention as it should be today, Dr. Sni?
Yes. So thinking, we start off with the fundamentals of the program. That's why we divided. There will be 6 modules, and then the first 2 modules will focus on the fundamentals. The second 2 modules will be on the skills pertaining to thinking, and the third part will be going into the practical applications. So in the fundamentals, we set off to the questions. What is actually thinking? In Islam, we know it as tafakkur, and it derives from the word fikr, to think, to fakkara, to meaning to think, which is as brilliantly put by one of my teachers, Professor Muhammad Zaini Usman, is the movement of the mind from meaning to meaning. And further on, we can go into that fundamental question. Then we ask, what is mind and what is the intellect, which is akal, that faculty of the human soul. Meaning, if we refer to the West, then the West says, previously you have psychology, but it is actually the combination of psyche and logia, the study of the mind, and they couldn't figure out what the psyche is. They are just repeating what the ancient Greeks are talking about: the mind, the psyche, the thing that they call the intellect, which generates with the body, but as the body dies, so it will die with the mind. But Islam has a different perspective towards that. We believe that the human being is actually a duality, a combination, or between a spiritual aspect and the bodily aspect. And this spiritual aspect is that which has been breathed, something that God breathed into the body, and this soul has faculties in it, and one of it is akal, the intellect. So we want to go into understanding what the intellect is, especially when one of our greatest scholars, Al-Iji, says that the intellect is when we say I, when we refer to ourselves. So we want to look into, in fact, the first module, which will be conducted by the principal fellow of IKIM, Dr. Muhammad Sani Badrun. We look into knowing what is this intellect and how it relates to being a human being, al-insan. And from there, then we can explore, how reasoning and thinking is so much important. It's a fundamental aspect of being a human being, so much so that it directly connects with meanings, with ultimately finding happiness in this world. Otherwise, if the reasoning is wrong, if meaning cannot be ascertained, therefore all that we lead in our lives are just meaningless. It will be a meaningless living, which is the greatest problem that is being faced in the West. And some can say that today we are witnessing the rise in mental health issues, mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, and some of this problem we can attribute to the imbalances in the brain, the biochemical imbalances in the brain. But some other is due because of this so-called errors in reasoning, in worldview, in the beliefs that are being held. Some people held irrational beliefs. They thought that if you consider the existential crisis, where do we come from, and what is the purpose of our living in this world at the present time, and where we are going to. So the problem of the worldview should be able to answer these things, but many of us because of their error in reasoning, they couldn't find the answers to this. So the modules, the first one third of this our program aims to look into this very important question, Shafiq.
Yes, they are very interesting. In terms of the angle that you just conveyed to us there, and I feel that I think for some Muslims or for many Muslims, when they think about what this notion of thinking in the Islamic tradition or Islamic educational tradition, they often relate it only to this tradition of logic, mantik, right? But I think as you have shared with us earlier, it's much more than that. It pertains to the reality of man, this whole process of intellection. What does it mean? And it pertains, and the desire or the need to arrive at meanings, right? And I think a lot of these things has become either taken for granted or have been forgotten. And I think in particular Muslims do no longer see this distinction with how it's being understood in the modern West. I think in these days the more popular courses out there on thinking is critical thinking, but I don't think this course that you're offering, Thinking with Wisdom, is the same at all, Dr. Husni, with what is being offered out there. Can you tell us?
Yeah, because suppose we say that the West has its own intellectual tradition. They trace all the way back to the ancient Greeks with Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and they take pride in their tradition of logic. But we Muslims, our history, although close ended, we too, because ultimately we all come from Adam, and who is a civilizational builder, and who's been given the knowledge of the names of things. And the Quran says, "Allama wa allama Allahu Adama asma'a kullaha," that God taught him the name of things. So from here we can infer that God has already taught Adam the names of things which form meanings, and these meanings have to form in a chain of meanings, and from there the discipline of the intellectual ability of man expands. And with the prophets, with Prophet Ibrahim, who in the Quran is said that he employed reasoning. He employed what we call to be logic to arrive to the conclusion that there is a God, and this God is the one creator, and he created this life. So from there, we cannot be so simplistic to say that logic comes from the West, but rather Islam has rescued it from the West. It has found it, and it has extracted what's useful using the Quran as a measure, as a filter, as the true measure with which the discipline of mantik comes about. And then we can see this, how it is being employed by the logicians, the mutakallimun, the mantiqiyun of our tradition. So it's not as simple as saying that logic is simply Greek logic, because this is even in the Quran we can find it is how it's just happened to be how the human mind works. That it forms premises, a premise one, premise two, and then it comes to a conclusion. Okay, so from there we try to the Muslims have formed a tradition called Bahas wal Munazara, which happens to be the fourth module that we have, which is about, and the third module will be about logical mind. So the fourth, the ensuing modules would be about the proper way of employing those skills to engage in a proper debate in order to arrive to truth. So this is how we will expand that, the history of that, to show that logic does not belong to the West, but rather it was Islam that rescued it it was a rather an ancient knowledge, not exclusive to the Greeks and the Latins, but it has basis. And from this knowledge, the Islamic uh, fiqh, the laws, philosophy, theology has expanded to answer the more pressing concerns, or even the minutest detail in the problems of our daily lives. It is meant to solve the problems of our life, not only in purification, but also in ethics part, in how we deal with disputations, and ultimately how do we arrive to that higher truth which I've mentioned.
That's wonderful, Dr. Husni. And I think based on your explanation just now, I think it's safe to say that the subject matter of thinking, logic, as well as its related topics that you're highlighting through this course as well, is very much rooted in the learning tradition of Islam, very much rooted in the scholarly tradition of Islam, and it's something that has always been there in practice by the greatest ulama in our history. I wonder also, Dr. Husni, as for how do you think is the significance of such subject matter or such offering?
Yeah.
Because like when you mentioned like adabul bahath wal munazara, this ethics of disputation and debate that will be delivered by one of our senior fellows, Mr. Asham, who actually translated from the Arabic text into the English for this particular course that you're offering. And interestingly, this subject matter was even introduced in the Ottoman education system. But in the modern times, it doesn't seem like it's something familiar anymore. So, but how do you see the potential or the significance of the course like this, like thinking with wisdom, for the modern Muslim world? Husni, please.
Yeah. So we see, that's what I think we were trying to solve is first the line of reasoning. How we form opinions, and also how do we solve problems in the workplace. Today we have to manage conflicts within the family unit, within the society, within among community leaders, and also problems in organization. How do we ensure that the meetings that we have can be productive meetings? They are not wasteful meetings, and they are based on facts, on agreements. And how do we ensure that blunders, and how can we minimize those blunders? The fact that the early fact that I mentioned to you, brother Shafiq, earlier on, how do we ensure that the members of our society do not suffer from cognitive dissonance from within themselves, from the community? Today we see that all these problems are ultimately rooted in the human mind, in the human heart, that we govern. When we govern or administer something, we do not do it for the greater good, and ultimately as a way to obtain the pleasure of our creator, but solely because of selfish motives and selfish intentions, to aggrandize oneself at the expense of others. And that is what modern capitalistic notions are driving the community, and it's very deleterious, it's very damaging, not only to ourselves but also to the family, to the community, to the environment. These capitalist notions. So we try to follow the Sharia in the way that works for that places, or is able to situate ourselves in the grand plan of the Creator, works for the community, and ultimately obtains the pleasure of Allah Taala. And I think it solves many problems today. When we make daily life decisions, when we interact with one another, when we make decisions as a community leader, or even at the national level as a political leader. How do we ensure that our thought processes are in line with reasoning, in line with the religion, with the requirements of the religion, and it ensure the well-being of the people whom we are leading. And I think at the community levels, I think it's important because people can be not only be well informed of the decisions they are going to make, the people whom they will appoint as their leaders, but also to distinguish between truthful claims and false presumptions. I think and then uh, I don't it has so many applications, and uh, we try to look into that in our program. We have many interested participants who are coming from all walks of life, from among the general public, from among the academicians, and also people who are entrusted with the training of government officers and they can apply the knowledge that they will obtain in improving themselves, improving their community, or their organizations, and to the ummah as a whole.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad Husni Muhammad Amin.
Welcome.
And indeed, I think just to recap a bit, like some of these important words that Dr. Husni just shared, indeed, this whole discipline of proper thinking in Islam is indeed something of extreme importance for not only for our professional social lives, which indeed is of great importance, but also even for our religious and spiritual personal lives. Because I think it's often taken for granted that in Islam, for you to have a very thriving, balanced religious spiritual life, you need to have proper rational capacity as well, because there's a tendency as well for people to be to be delving too much into what they perceive to be a spiritual life at the expense of the rational. So that hence there isn't a balance, right? And I think
Yes.
the greatest ulama, the greatest Muslims in our history have always advocated that a lot of our personal, religious, and spiritual life needs to be based on proper reasoning, proper thinking, and of course this has always been part of the tradition of the Muslims. Thank you so much, Dr. Husni, for your time
Very
and
much
for
welcome,
sharing.
Brother Sharif.
Inshallah, we hope to have you more to share with us a lot of your insights on many things that you are passionate and interested about. Inshallah.
Inshallah. My
Thank
my
you.
genuine pleasure.
With ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are honored to have with us Dr. Muhammad Husni Muhammad Amin. He is the fellow at IKIM, and we've been learning from him on the subject of thinking with wisdom, which is a course that is IKIM offering for the first time. Though unfortunately, we're for this particular edition in this year, this course is full. But inshallah, this is for those who are interested. They could reach out to Dr. Husni as well, or perhaps to our institute if they would like to know more about future offerings of this course. With that, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.